Everyone, LP here, and this is a video review of the movie Homestead. If that's not something you're interested in, please just swipe away. As a prepper, we look at things very differently than most other people do. I've also purposely left this side, no, this side of the screen open for any media that I can throw in there that pertains to the movie itself, so you have a better picture of these things. Now, before we go any further, guys, if you could do me a favor, hit that thumbs up button so that it's going to be good. This is going to be good. So just do it now so that it draws more people in and it does help the channel. Also, if you're not a subscriber, please consider subscribing because we're going to be doing some more of this stuff on Homestead. There's an actual entire series about a homestead and the end of the war, the apocalypse and shtf and things like that. So um, please think about it. Now, let's go ahead and get into it. Now, in the very opening scenes of the movie, they show a nuclear weapon, looks more like a dirty bomb going off on a sailboat off the coast of California. And somehow this completely wipes out the power grid in California, shuts everything down, but apparently cell phones that are necessary to make emergency phone calls, which is super duper not realistic. Now, with that said, it looked more like a dirty bomb than anything else, and that would have no effect. Later in the movie, they actually make note that the Geiger counters there in Colorado read nothing, which would make perfect sense except for the prevailing winds that normally run from west to east in the United States would eventually bring some radiation over there. Why it happened, don't know. They don't really talk much about it, but that's not important because what we're going to talk about today is more of the preparedness side of the movie. And to be honest with you, there were some very cliche type things. They seem to be just trying to hit as many items on the preparedness checklist as possible to, I don't know, cover all their bases. But the and then there's the follow-up with the Russians took down the power's out in Colorado because the Russians took out the entire eastern seaboard with a cyber attack, killing all of the power grid on that part of the United States, which is technically not connected to any place in Colorado if you know anything about the power grid. But anyway, it is what it is. Once again, please remember that it's a movie, and the purpose of this critique of the movie is simply from the preparedness standpoint, and not to say that it was a bad movie because it really was not a bad movie. It was not as good as I thought it would be. But moving along, some of the things that I noticed were that when things went down, called the wife, go to my brother's. He's going to be expecting you. Go to the homestead. So there was a plan within the family, which I thought was really great. Also, they talked about, hey, go in the closet, get the go bag, which means that they weren't like full-time preppers. They simply just had a preparedness mindset. They had a go bag. Whether they created it or was created for them wasn't important. It's just that the family was involved. I thought that was pretty good, pretty smart. Another thing that they showed was the Tesla bioweapon defense system, which seems kind of outlandish and far-fetched, but apparently it's a real thing. It actually does exist. It is actually part of this Tesla system, but I couldn't find. It's basically a HEPA filter, a double HEPA filter that is built into Teslas now that can filter out a lot of particle. I think it was zero point zero 0.03 parts per million, which is not bad, but that is not going to filter out biological weapons. And I don't think that Tesla system actually does that, even though it actually does make a positive pressure uh, atmosphere inside of the vehicle, which would actually keep things from getting in. So I thought it was interesting, far-fetched, but apparently it's real. Next, there was actually a mention of homeschooling for one of the key characters, the daughter of the actual guy who built the homestead. They had been homeschooling her. Apparently, they were worth millions and millions and millions, which is why they could afford to have such a ginormous homestead, which was kind of neat. As usual, the people who have the money have the money. There was no reference to a bunker, but there is a reference to the vault that has all the ammunition and machine guns in it. In the series, which I started watching, they actually start to try and make a play for that, but we'll see how that pans out. But I found it interesting that homeschooling was actually referenced. And if you know anything about our school system, right now, homeschooling is the best option for our children. Something else they talked about during their escape was the traffic, and the how bad it was. And then as they got further from the city, the traffic got better, but then the sources of gasoline got shorter, got smaller and smaller. And even in the one case where they escaped in their Tesla, they had to pull over, and they ended up stealing somebody's car because the Tesla had run out of battery power. So is it smart to have a Tesla or not? I'm not really sure, but I know that you can still put gasoline in cars and you can go the distance. Another thing that I noticed was is they actually seem to have kind of a communications plan. Um, there was an instance where they actually were able to use the Garmin InReach to reach people when their cell phone systems in their area were out, but the ones that they were trying to reach were not, because the Garmin InReach has the ability to send text messages to cell phones via satellite, obviously. So I think that that would actually be a good tool to actually have, regardless. Is it more of a backup? Yes, it is. I personally own one myself, and I just use it because you can use it out in the wilderness and contact people. And the other part of communications plans was is that the chief security officer was trying to contact his wife and kids who were driving in a minivan, and they weren't answering their phones, which was kind of weird. Normally people are attached to their phones, kind of like, melted to their skulls almost, or playing a video game or watching something stupid on their phone, maybe even this video, I'm not sure. But I thought it ironic that they weren't answering their phones, and if you're part of a communications plan, you should know that your phone should not be far from you during a crisis event, and crisis events just don't, "Hey, here I am." They just kinda appear, and so you should be more vigilant, when you should just be paying more attention, I guess. So when the chief security guy gets to the homestead, he starts to show the guy who owns the place, Mr. Ross, I believe. He starts to show him like, hey, here's the property, and there's this and there's that, and where's your perimeter, and the security guy starts pointing out all sorts of different things that the owner hadn't even thought about, which leads me to a lot of people just don't think about security. I live in an apartment, and my security is very limited, but I have a security plan. If I were out there in the middle of nowhere, believe me, there would be much more robust security measures, because a lot of homesteaders in general just don't think about this. Now, do they live to the point that this man did? No, most homesteaders don't. In fact, many of their properties butt up against other properties, and there's like a mutual support network for homesteaders. But this goes down to knowing your neighbors, which had not really been talked about during the movie, other than they knew who their neighbors were, but they didn't trust them, which is kind of dumb. This leaches into neighboring land and knowing your neighbors and who you can trust. One of the things mentioned in the movie was that they wanted to reinforce the gates, and the owner was like, "Well, why are we doing that?" It's well, because everybody's going to want to be here, and the key word is everyone will want to be there. One of the things that I did notice that I hadn't really thought about was that there was a civil unrest, not because of the situation, but because of all of the government notices on phones and on TVs seemed to have the effect of kind of riling up the crowd, like creating panic. And I think that that's something that we should be aware of if we were ever in a situation like this. Now, one neat thing was is they kind of had a rebel radio station that they would listen to, and it was shortwave. So it's probably a good idea to have a shortwave receiver. They're very inexpensive. You can buy them on Amazon like it's nobody's business. One of the lessons that people should have learned from this movie is that the unprepared will suffer. Watching a guy feed his family the last of the pickles and ramen noodles for supper, it wasn't cool. And then he's like, his daughter's got to go to the bathroom and the toilets won't flush. We didn't plan for that. That's a problem. And so he's got to take her outside, and it's really kind of ridiculous, because it all should have been done in complete darkness, but because it's a movie, he's got to be like holding up a lantern, and she's off in the corner trying to do her thing. She's never really on the screen, which is fine. It's just a movie. But then the scenario, uh, or the scene gets bigger with the next door neighbor. Hey, get out of my house! Blah blah blah. And then boom, someone shoots him, and then he has to grab his daughter out of the backyard, run her back into the house, and say, get in the car. We're leaving now. They have a gun. Why don't you have a gun? What's really, really odd was when they were leaving, when they were driving away, they almost ran over a couple of people, and then the guy talking to him through the window was actually an armed friend saying, "Where are you going, man?" Where he had the opportunity to secure his family with a group of people who were armed individuals, and they could have created a group that could have stayed off these problems. An odd scenario was Blake Masterson. He worked from Oakwood Zoning Enforcement. And so obviously he's the protagonist. He's going to come in. He's going to cause problems. He wants what they have. He wants everybody to be fair and equitable. He's acting on with some kind of fake authority that the city has given him, which is all bogus. And you could see through it right through in the movie. You're like, okay, great. This movie's going downhill pretty quick. The reality is he placed himself in a position of power. He represents the government, giving him authority. And in the movie, it was just basically a shakedown. I'm not sure why he was doing this or why he felt it. He played the character very well. But unfortunately, if this were a card game that we're playing that we should all know about already, the answer would have been originally shoot him in the face. He didn't need to come back, and he does. He does. He comes back. By the way, he comes back several times actually, but only once in the movie, and it doesn't go well for him. What I also noticed too was they were trying to train. They were trying to make security a priority, but what we all know as preppers is that training training during the crisis is not the time to be training. You should have trained up well before then. And uh, I don't know what to say about that one. That was kind of stupid. The movie itself was not bad, but it just kind of goes into these stupid places. Another term that was used was you can't eat bullets. After a training scenario, they told him, yes, we'll train, but you have to teach your Navy SEAL guys how to garden and forage and sow things and stuff like that. And I think that that's important because that's it, having multiple skills is always important. And there's actually a term that I'll use later on in this video for that. The issue of trespassers came up a couple of times. One of the big things, and this video is starting to get a little bit long, and I still have 3 other pages, but I'm not gonna bore you with all this stuff. Some key things that I found: the medical system that they had sucked. They had a doctor and they had a registered nurse, and somehow they were not able to treat bullet wounds. It made no sense to me. They had piles and piles of equipment, yet people died. The leader of this place laid on a gurney for 10 days sleeping. And it's just some of it was just a little ridiculous. I really wish they hadn't gone down that road. And then there was questions like, is this an ark or is this a fortress? Well, it's both actually. The bottom line is that towards the end of the movie, you started to really get the sense that it was smarter to be community based than anything else. What we should have learned from this video is that human power, or human beings, are the most unused asset in a crisis scenario. In this particular one, it's kind of like the entire country gets shut down. We have to depend on each other. We open the gates. We make as much food as we can. We find a way. We adapt. Because if not, then you're just little bubble that might outlive a few people. But for the most part, you're just going to suffer. You're going to just survive, not thrive, and survival sucks. Okay, so I hope you got something out of this video. Please leave something in the comments. As usual, hit that thumbs up on the way out the door. Subscribe if you're not. I'll be talking more about the series itself in the future. Stay safe. Have a great day, and I'll see you when I see you. Bye-bye.